The world thinks a rich household is protected by walls, money, and guards at the gate. But I have learned that the fragile things live inside the quiet. A teenager's confidence, a parent's trust, and the thin patience that keeps a dream from snapping. In the Shen residence, marble floors shone like still water. Floor-to-ceiling glass held the city at a polite distance, and the air always carried a trace of jasmine, tea, laundry steam, and the lemon polish the housekeeper loved. I had been here 17 years, long enough that the home's routines were stitched into my hands. My name is Lilian, though the family calls me Auntie Le, and I am the nanny of Shen Ningning, the only daughter of Shen Jingyan. I was there when Ningning was a newborn the size of a loaf of bread, red-faced and furious at the concept of air. I warmed her first bottle, rocked her through fevers, and once, in the half-sleep of a dawn shift, learned that even the wealthiest babies still produce disasters in diapers. I have fed her, bathed her, scolded her gently, and held her when she cried so hard she shook. Somewhere between my hands and her growing bones, we became family without paperwork. Ningning turned 17 in her final year of high school, the year that swallowed weekends and spat out practice tests. She had become the kind of girl strangers called well-behaved, which is another way of saying she learned to carry pressure without letting it leak. She studied with a steady focus, but she also held on to small joys like talismans. Her favorite was cosplay. She had chosen a character from an old fantasy game, Xiao Ximing, and she wanted the costume to be perfect after the university entrance exam. "Auntie," she said one evening, cheeks pink with excitement. "The sleeves have to move like smoke, and the embroidery has to look like constellations." I promised her I would make it. A promise to a child becomes a vow in my body, and I have never been good at breaking vows. So I spent nights collecting reference images, measuring fabric, and learning a new kind of embroidery that made the thread catch light the way stars do. The night everything changed began like any other. I carried a warm glass of milk to her desk because routine is a ladder you can climb when your thoughts feel like a pit. Ningning did not look up immediately. She was wrestling with calculus, the kind of question that turns teenagers into quiet warriors. "Auntie, I'm almost done," she murmured, pen moving quickly. I set the milk beside her elbow and sat on the sofa with my sewing basket, the dress form waiting like a silent witness. The only sounds were the scratch of her pen, the whisper of thread sliding through cloth, and the steady breath of the air conditioner. Then the air itself seemed to blink. Words appeared above her desk, floating like lanterns made of ink. They were not reflected in the wood, not cast by any projector, not attached to any screen. They simply existed, crisp and impossible, as if reality had opened a chat window. The lines arrived in bursts, carrying a tone I recognized from the internet. Excited, judgmental, loud with opinions. "Don't do it, baby, put the bag down," one line screamed, as if Ningning were about to step off a roof. Another shouted, "Who dares to steal my ship?" A third rooter laughed. "The cabbage is about to be plowed by the pig." I froze, needle hovering over fabric, because the first instinct when you see a miracle is to flail. And flailing is how you frighten a child who already carries enough fear. Ningning kept working, unaware, eyes narrowed in concentration. The floating text reacted to her movements like an audience leaning forward. "Here comes the love letter," it crowed. "This is where she falls." My mind finally caught up. The words were describing a story, and the story's heroine was the girl in front of me. Ningning reached for her backpack to pull out a reference sheet. My body moved with the practice speed of years spent preventing accidents. "Wait," I said lightly, smiling as if I were only being helpful, and slid the bag toward myself. I opened it the way I had opened it 1,000 times to check if she forgot snacks. Inside was a small universe. Pens, sticky notes, a folded timetable, a lipstick she never admitted to wearing, and an envelope sealed with a pink heart sticker. The name on the front was written in confident strokes. Shen Ningning, from Qi Shen. The ink in the air burst into applause. My stomach turned hot. I did not tear the envelope in a dramatic flourish. Drama feeds stories, and I refused to feed this one. I palmed the letter with the quiet speed of a librarian stealing a loud stapler, replaced it with a blank worksheet, and zipped the bag. Ningning thanked me without suspicion and returned to her equations. The captions hissed, furious. "Villain aunt, cheater, sabotage." I stared at the floating words until their glow wavered. "I planted this cabbage with my own hands," I whispered, voice too soft for Ningning to hear, "and no pig is plowing her future." I hid the envelope in a folder among old report cards and vaccination records, safe, boring, invisible. and I tested the miracle like any sensible woman would. I waved my hand through the words. My skin felt nothing. I turned on my phone camera and aimed it at the desk. The screen showed only Ning Ning, milk, and homework. I blinked hard until my eyes watered. The captions remained. They were for me, not for the world, which meant either I was hallucinating or I had been drafted into something stranger than sanity. Then another line appeared, calmer than the rest, as if someone in the crowd had leaned close to speak honestly. This is a chasing after regret romance novel. The male lead will ruin her and call it love. The line was followed by a summary so detailed it made my teeth ache. Qi Shen would pressure Ning Ning into secret dating. Her grades would slip. She would miss a scholarship interview. A transfer girl would trigger misunderstandings. Ning Ning would end up injured, her hands damaged, her life reduced to survival. In the original plot, Shen Jingyan would seek revenge and be destroyed in the process. And at the end, after funerals and regrets, Qi Shen would chase her memory like a ghost and burn himself on the ashes. The crowd in the air cheered as if tragedy were entertainment. I have not been to university, but I have lived long enough to recognize a trap. Some people believe love means possession, and those people mistake a girl's kindness for permission. Qi Shen was Ning Ning's childhood friend, the boy who once shared snacks with her in kindergarten and held her bike steady when she learned to ride. Shen Jingyan had always regarded him with gentle approval, because adults love the comfort of familiar faces. If the air was telling the truth, familiarity was exactly how the knife would get close. I did not sleep much that night. I watched Ning Ning's door, listened to the house settle, and read the captions as they rolled by like a river of strangers. Some demanded I respect fate. Some begged me to save the heroine. Some typed jokes so cruel they made my hands shake. And in the quiet gaps, I saw confessions from people who were not joking. One wrote about a mother who shamed her for receiving a love letter. Another wrote about a father who broke his child's leg and still forced an exam. Their pain felt real enough to cut. If those voices existed, then this miracle was not only about Ning Ning. It was about every child whose life had been treated like someone else's plot. At dawn, I called Shen Jingyan. He answered on the second ring, voice hoarse with exhaustion, because he had been living in meetings and airports for years. "Auntie Le, is Ning Ning okay?" he asked. "Always first. She's fine," I said. And then I spoke bluntly. Because politeness is a luxury when a child is at the edge of a cliff. Someone put a love letter in her bag. The sender is Qi Shen. A pause. The length of a man forcing himself to listen. "He's a good boy," Jingyan began reflexively. "He is a boy," I corrected. "And he is pressing. I want to move with Ning Ning to the city apartment for the rest of the year, and I want a position at her school so I can support her without hovering like a prison guard." Jingyan exhaled, a sound like relief mixed with shame. "Do whatever you think is best," he said. "I trust you. I should have been closer. I don't want to lose her." The captions in the air, eavesdropping on our call, typed something for once that was almost tender. Father finally shows up. Ning Ning's mother had died years ago, quietly, in a way that left no drama but hollowed the house. Jingyan loved his daughter, but grief had taught him to keep moving so he would not have to sit inside it. He built wealth like a fortress and called it protection. He hired the best tutors, bought the best schools, installed the best security, and still missed the one threat money cannot stop. Emotional coercion wrapped in a familiar smile. Moving to the city apartment was easy. Rich people can relocate by snapping fingers. Jingyan arranged a library position for me at Hawthorne Senior High, the kind of school people called a ladder to the elite universities. The school was built from old stone and newer glass. Its corridors smelled of chalk dust, printer toner, instant coffee, and ambition. Students moved in flocks, each one trying to look calm while carrying a private panic. A library is a quiet battlefield, and I am good at quiet. In the beginning, Qi Shen's pursuit looked ordinary. He waited outside Ning Ning's classroom with a grin and a drink. He offered to walk her home, as if the city itself were dangerous, but his company was not. He teased her with childhood nicknames, trying to tug her back into an old pattern where she felt responsible for his feelings. Ning Ning smiled politely and returned to her notes, but politeness is exactly what pushy people feed on. Whenever he tried to corner her, I arranged the world to be crowded. Group study sessions in the library, volunteer tasks that required 2 students, meetings with teachers that made her unavailable. When he suggested studying together, I offered Ning Ning a timed practice session in the library's side room with snacks and a ridiculous wager. If she finished a set of problems, I would attempt her favorite dance trend for exactly 30 seconds and embarrass myself on purpose. She laughed. Laughter loosened fear. Fear is what manipulators prefer. The captions mocked my tactics as boring adult stuff. Boring saves lives. Still, senior year is a grinder even without romance. In March, Ningning's monthly exam score dipped for the first time all year. It was not a collapse, but it was enough to trigger concern, and enough for the floating crowd to crow. The plot is working. Her advisor asked for a guardian meeting. Jingyan was overseas, moving money like weather, so I went in his place. The advisor's office smelled of citrus cleaner and worry. Ningning is excellent, the advisor said, but her focus has shifted. She looks tired. Ningning sat beside me with her hands folded too tightly, cheeks burning with shame. Adults often think shame motivates. In reality, shame eats attention like acid. I thanked the advisor, asked for specific study recommendations, and refused to let the conversation become a moral lecture about girls and boys. On the way home, I did not scold Ningning. I took her to a noodle shop, ordered spicy broth and sesame dessert, and waited for her shoulders to soften in the steam. Only when she looked like herself again did I speak. "You are not dirty for having feelings," I told her. "But feelings are not rulers. They are weather. You can notice them without letting them decide your path." Ningning stared into her bowl, then whispered, "Qishen says he loves me." Her voice held uncertainty, not romance. "He says I'm cold when I don't reply. He says he can't sleep if I don't talk to him. He says I'm the only one who understands him." She spoke faster, as if confessing a crime. I don't even know when it turned into this. I listened, because listening is how you give a child their own brain back. Then I said the truth that teenagers hate, and later remember. Love does not require you to carry another person's mood on your back. If a boy treats your boundaries like insults, he is not loving you. He is testing your defenses. The captions flickered, quieter. One line appeared, small and sincere. An adult finally says it out loud. "We made a plan together, not as enemies but as partners." That night, after the captions vanished, I did not sleep. I sat at the small dining table in the apartment, the city lights flickering through the curtains like restless thoughts, and I tried to remember every line I had seen. They had spoken the language of serialized romances: male lead, female lead, misunderstanding, chasing after regret. The phrase that chilled me most was the one about the university entrance exam, because in our country, that exam is not a paper, it is a bridge. If a child falls off that bridge, society does not throw a rope. It points at the water and calls it a lesson. I opened the folder where I had hidden Qishen's letter and read it once, carefully. It was not a confession. It was a claim. He wrote about waiting for her, about having rights because of childhood, about how her success meant nothing unless she shared it with him. He did not ask what she wanted. He announced what he expected. When I finished, my hands were steady, but my chest felt hot. That was the moment I stopped treating this as teenage drama and began treating it as risk management. If you have never raised a child, you may think love can be delivered in speeches. I raised Ningning from the hour she entered this world, red and furious, with lungs that made the nurse laugh. I fed her the first spoon of rice porridge, walked her through fevers, and taught her to say no politely, because adults prefer polite boundaries they can ignore. I also learned the small truths that build a person. She calms down when someone hums. She lies about being hungry when she's nervous. She pretends not to care about praise, then secretly rereads kind messages for days. Her mother, Madame Shen, used to say Ningning was like spring rain, quiet, persistent, nourishing, and then she would go to her piano practice and pretend she had not been sentimental. After Madame Shen died, the house became a museum of her absence. Jingyan threw himself into work, and Ningning threw herself into studying, and I became the thread that kept their grief from cutting them apart. Ningning would not meet Qishen alone in hidden places. She would keep messages factual, brief, and firm. If he tried to guilt her, she would repeat one sentence and stop explaining, because explanations are doors pushy people pry open. She practiced saying it in the mirror until it sounded like her own voice. "I'm focusing on the exam. We can talk after." The first time she sent that message, her hands trembled. Qishen replied with a sad emoji, then with a paragraph accusing her of changing, then with a joke pretending he had never been serious. He was trying every tool in the box to see which one opened her. I taught her to respond the same way you respond to a toddler's tantrum. Calm, brief, consistent, It felt cruel to her at first, because kind people confuse compassion with surrender. I reminded her that compassion is not a rope someone can tie around your wrists. In April, a transfer student arrived, right on schedule, like a stagehand carrying a prop. Her name was Lin Yuxi. She spoke with a careful softness, eyes shiny as if she were always close to tears, and within days she arranged herself beside Qi Shen as if the seat had been waiting for her. She praised Ningning's grades too sweetly, sighed about being bad at studying, and asked for homework help in a way that sounded like admiration but operated like theft. She also found subtle ways to push. If Ningning answered a teacher confidently, Yuxi laughed too loud, as if confidence were arrogance. If Ningning refused an invitation, Yuxi widened her eyes and said, "Oh, you're so strict with yourself," as if self-control were a flaw. The floating crowd adored her entrance. "Triangle unlocked," it screamed. "Drama time." I watched Yuxi smile and thought of wolves that learned to wear sheep's wool. The first serious incident happened on a rainy afternoon, when students moved like damp birds between buildings. Qi Shen waited near the stairwell, just out of camera view, and intercepted Ningning as she headed to the library. "Talk to me," he demanded, voice low and urgent. "Why are you acting like I'm nothing?" Ningning tried her practice line. "I'm focusing on the exam. We can talk after." He stepped closer. "After is always after. You're avoiding me." His hand reached for her wrist, the way he used to tug her along in childhood, and that familiarity was precisely what made it dangerous. I arrived then, because I had been watching from the corridor, pretending to examine a notice board. "Ningning," I said briskly, as if I had been looking for her for a boring reason. "The counselor asked for your scholarship form." Qi Shen's face tightened. "Auntie Le," he said, forcing friendliness. "We were just talking." "Then you can talk where people can see," I replied. I did not shout. I did not threaten. I simply created daylight. And predators hate daylight. That evening, I reported the stairwell incident to the counselor and to the librarian supervisor, not to punish Ningning, but to build a paper trail. The captions booed me. "Snitch. Overreacting." Those words were familiar, too. They were the same words adults used to silence girls for decades. I had grown up in a neighborhood where a girl's reputation was treated like a family asset, and where the easiest way to protect the family was to sacrifice the girl. When I was 16, a boy slipped a note into my desk, and my mother found it and called me filthy for weeks. She marched to my school and made a spectacle, and I learned then that shame can feel like a public beating. I told Ningning that story not to make her pity me, but to show her a map of what not to accept. "If anyone tries to punish you for being noticed," I said, "we punish the behavior, not the girl." Ningning cried in relief, and relief is one of the purest forms of love. Yuxi adapted quickly. She began sending Ningning messages that looked like kindness and functioned like traps. "Qi Shen is so upset," she wrote one evening. "He says you don't care if he lives or dies. Can you please talk to him? I'm worried he'll do something stupid." Ningning showed me the screen. Eyes wide, compassion fighting anger. The captions vibrated with pleasure. "Emotional blackmail arc." I took Ningning's phone gently, typed a reply with her watching, and handed it back. The message was plain. "If he is threatening self-harm, tell an adult in his family and the school counselor. I am not responsible for managing his threats." Ningning swallowed. "Is that too cold?" she asked. "It is warm," I said. "It is warm because it refuses to let him use fear as a leash." Yuxi replied with a crying emoji. Qi Shen replied with a furious essay. Ningning did not answer. The sky outside did not fall. This was how you teach a child that refusing manipulation does not summon disaster. The scholarship interview season arrived alongside a wave of school events. Teachers assigned extra assignments to build stamina. Parents sent care packages as if snacks could fight anxiety. Ningning's classmates started collapsing in bathrooms from exhaustion. I adjusted Ningning's meals the way I adjusted a hem. Careful, responsive. More protein, less sugar. Tea in the afternoon, warm milk at night. Short walks to shake off adrenaline. I also trained her mind to rest without guilt. When she finished a set of problems, I made her sit by the window for 2 minutes and describe what she saw. A pigeon, a cloud shaped like a boat, a woman in a red coat. Observation is a small rescue. It pulls you out of the future and into the present. The captions, when they appeared, grew less loud. Sometimes they even offered advice instead of demands. "Sleep," one line wrote. curt as a nurse. Another said, "Stop romanticizing suffering." I almost laughed. Even strangers can mature when they witness enough pain. The Artemis Scholarship interview took place in late May at a research institute across the river. The night before, Ningning paced our living room, reciting her interests as if they were spells. Shen Jingyan sat with his tie loosened, pretending to read a report while actually watching his daughter like she might vanish. He had flown back early, which in his world was a confession of priority. I placed pears on the table because Ningning associated pears with stability, a ridiculous superstition that nonetheless helped. "What if I freeze?" she asked. "Then you breathe," I said. "If you don't know an answer, you tell them how you would find it." Serious people are not hunting for perfection. They are hunting for honesty. Jingyan cleared his throat. "Ningning," he said, voice rough. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you are already the best thing I have ever made." Ningning blinked hard, startled, because her father's pride usually hid behind gifts and tutors. She nodded once, as if storing the sentence for later. At the institute, Ningning was brilliant. The panel asked questions designed to puncture arrogance, and she answered with humility and crisp logic. She did not pretend to know what she did not know. She explained her method for learning. When she walked out, her shoulders were lower, as if she had removed a heavy coat. We celebrated with dumplings and bitter tea, and for an hour the world felt ordinary, which was a luxury. Then the plot, stubborn as mold, tried again. As we returned to the school to retrieve Ningning's bag, Yushi messaged, "Qi Shen is behind the gym. He says he can't breathe. Please, just talk to him once." The captions flared, hungry. Ningning's face paled. Jingyan's jaw tightened. "We should go," Ningning said, "because kindness is her first language." I did not forbid her. I simply insisted we go together, under light, with witnesses. Behind the gym, dusk had bruised the sky. The ground smelled of wet grass and old rubber mats. Qi Shen stood there with his hands in his pockets, face set in wounded determination. Yushi hovered a few steps behind him, pretending to be a worried friend while watching as if she were waiting for applause. "Ningning," Qi Shen said, voice trembling with practiced emotion. "I can't do this anymore. You either choose me, or you choose your cold, lonely future." He stepped closer. "Don't make me look stupid." Jingyan took a step forward, and the air shifted. "Fathers have gravity. You are already making yourself look stupid," Jingyan said coldly. Qi Shen flinched, then turned his desperation toward the easier target. "Auntie Le," he pleaded. "You know me. We grew up together. I'm not a bad person." "Bad is not the only danger," I replied. "Entitled is dangerous too." Ningning's voice, when she spoke, was steady. "Qi Shen, I'm focusing on the exam. If you respect me, you will wait. If you don't respect me, you will keep pushing." Qi Shen laughed, bitter and sharp. "You're acting like I'm a criminal," he snapped, and his hand moved as if to grab her wrist, reflexive, the old habit of control. I stepped between them without touching him, the way you block a door without needing to slam it. "Enough," I said. "I kept your letter. I kept your messages. I reported the stairwell. If you touch her again, the school will have more than my words." His hand froze in midair. Yushi's expression tightened. Her mask slipped for a heartbeat, revealing irritation rather than concern. A counselor's flashlight beam swept across the grass. The counselor had followed, because I had warned her to expect a scene. "Qi Shen," the counselor called, voice firm. "We need to talk." The crowd in the air sputtered, as if the script had lost its page. Someone typed grudgingly, "The aunt is actually competent." Someone else wrote, "This is what adults should do." I felt no triumph. I felt only the tired relief of a woman who caught a fall before bones broke. After that night, the school treated Qi Shen differently. Teachers watched him the way they watch a student who has begun cheating, with polite skepticism. The counselor checked in with Ningning weekly. Friends who had once giggled about cute romance began to understand the difference between affection and pressure. Ningning's name stopped being paired with his in whispers. Yushi tried to pivot into victimhood, telling classmates Qi Shen was misunderstood, but the counselor had already met with her as well, and the staff's patience for theater was gone. Ningning's attention returned to where it belonged, her own mind. She built her study schedule like a fortress, but not a prison. Work blocks, rest blocks, short walks, meals eaten sitting down. I left small notes in her lunchbox, never copying the same sentence. Because repetition turns encouragement into wallpaper. Jingyan started coming home earlier when he could, not with lavish gifts, but with presents. He asked about her day. He listened instead of solving. It was awkward at first. Rich men are often trained to fix with money. Watching him learn to fix with time felt like watching a tree learn to bend toward light. When I asked Jingyan to be more present, he did not argue. He simply looked ashamed. He had always believed the best gift a father could provide was a secure future. He did not understand that a future can be stolen in minutes if a child's mind is hijacked. He began doing small things at first. He ate breakfast with Ningning when he could, even if it meant checking emails with one hand. He attended a school open day and sat through speeches with the patience of someone learning a new language. He asked Ningning questions without turning them into advice. The first time he said, "Tell me how you feel." He sounded like he was reading the line from a script, and Ningning laughed, and that laughter was the first gentle thing between them in years. The captions, when they appeared, reacted oddly to these scenes. They did not jeer. They simply hovered, quiet, as if the audience had never seen a father change course in the middle of the story. At school, I built an ecosystem around Ningning, because isolation is where coercion thrives. I encouraged her to study with 2 classmates who were serious but kind. A boy who loved chemistry and spoke softly, and a girl who carried colored pens like weapons. We established a routine of group sessions in the library's open area, where everyone could see them. I also made sure Ningning had permission to be imperfect. When she made a mistake, I made one too, on purpose, and then laughed at myself so she could laugh without shame. We added a weekly reset hour, where she could talk about anything except grades. Sometimes she described her cosplay plans with such detail: fabric weight, embroidery patterns, the exact shade of gold thread that I could see her future surgeon's precision hiding inside a teenager's hobby. Qishen hated the ecosystem. He tried to wedge himself into it with jokes and charm, and when that failed, he tried to paint it as hostility. "Your auntie is controlling," he told Ningning in a message I later saved. "She's jealous of you growing up. She wants you dependent." It was an old tactic. Make the protector look like the jailer so the predator can look like freedom. Ningning showed me the message with trembling fingers. I did not react with outrage, because outrage would have made me the stereotype he wanted. I said, "People who respect you do not need to isolate you from the adults who care." Then I asked her to imagine the opposite message. If she had a younger cousin she loved, what would she say to the cousin about a boy who demanded secrecy? Ningning's jaw tightened. "I'd tell her to run," she said. And in that sentence I heard her spine forming. Yushi's sabotage was subtler than direct violence. She preferred rumors, the weapon that does not leave bruises. She hinted that Ningning's grades were too perfect. She asked loudly in the hallway whether scholarship committees cared about family connections, letting her words float like poison into the crowd. She tried to borrow Ningning's scholarship essay draft, claiming she wanted to learn the format, and when Ningning refused, Yushi's eyes flashed with a resentment she immediately covered with tears. I watched her cycle through expressions the way an actor cycles through masks. Hurt, confused, apologetic, innocent. I documented everything, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to remove fog. When the counselor finally asked why Ningning looked tense around Yushi, I did not offer gossip. I offered dates, screenshots, and calm sentences. Fog hates facts. One afternoon, the library hosted a school seminar about healthy relationships, the kind of event students usually endure with half attention. I asked the counselor if I could contribute a short section about boundaries. She hesitated, who invites a librarian to speak about love. But she had seen my documentation, and she had seen Ningning's face after Qishen's pressure, and she agreed. I stood at the front of the room with a whiteboard marker and no desire to sound dramatic. I said, "If someone's affection makes you smaller, that is not affection. It is appetite." I said, "No" is a complete sentence. I said, "A person who threatens to harm themselves if you don't date them is not asking for love. They are asking for control." Students shifted, suddenly awake. Some looked angry, some looked relieved. Afterward, 2 girls lingered to ask for help with their own situations. The captions appeared for a moment above the podium, not mocking, but quietly stunned, as if the crowd had forgotten the story could educate instead of entertain. The closer we got to the exams, the more Qishen tried to create a crisis that would force Ningning to choose him. He arrived outside the library with red eyes and the kind of trembling voice that makes kind people soften. "My parents are fighting," he said. "I can't breathe. I only calm down when you talk to me." In the original story, this would have been the hook. The heroine would sacrifice her own schedule to soothe him. The audience would call it romance, and her grades would slip. In our life, Ning Ning listened, then said, "I'm sorry you're hurting, but I'm not your therapist." And she handed him the counselor's office number. Qi Shen stared as if he had been slapped, because he expected her kindness to be a leash he could hold. When he turned away, his face hardened into something ugly, and the last of Ning Ning's hesitation evaporated. Some people teach you with gentleness, others teach you by revealing their teeth. After the gym confrontation, Jingyan asked me a question he had never asked before. "Did you ever regret staying with us?" he said quietly as we washed dishes. He did not mean the salary. He meant the burden. I thought of my small rented room years ago, of the first time Ning Ning reached for me with a fever, of Madame Shen's tired smile, of Jingyan's grief hidden behind business calls, and of the captions hovering like a judgmental sky. "No," I said, because even if the story tried to write a tragedy, I got to watch a child become herself. Jingyan nodded slowly, eyes shining, then turned back to the faucet as if water could hide emotion. That night, he drafted the first proposal for his medical foundation, not as a publicity move, but as a promise. He would use his strength to keep other families from losing their children to preventable despair. When Ning Ning began her summer research placement, she called me in a panic on her second week. "Auntie," she said, voice thin, "I think I'm not good enough." She had been assigned to a lab that studied prenatal complications, and the pace was unforgiving. She described a senior student who spoke sharply, a supervisor who offered feedback like blades, and a mistake she had made labeling a sample. I listened without interrupting, because panic needs space before it can accept oxygen. Then I asked her to tell me what she did next. "I corrected it," she admitted. "I wrote a note. I told the supervisor immediately." "Good," I said. "That is what competent people do." In romance stories, mistakes are used to humiliate heroines. In real life, mistakes are used to train professionals. There was a pause, then a laugh through tears. "You always make it sound simple," she sniffed. "It is simple," I said. "It is not easy. Those are different." The entrance exam arrived on time, indifferent to human drama. On the morning of the first test, Jingyan insisted on every superstition he had once mocked. He wore a pale gold jacket because someone online claimed gold meant victory. I wore a red cheongsam because another rumor said red meant prosperity, and because Ning Ning's late mother had once worn red on her happiest day. We stood at the gate among other parents dressed like walking talismans, and Ning Ning laughed until her shoulders loosened. "Do you two need to be this extra?" she teased. "Absolutely," I said. "If we are going to be ridiculous, we might as well be dedicated." Jingyan handed her a bottle of warm water like a sacred object. She kissed his cheek, squeezed my hand, and walked into the exam hall without looking back. That was when I knew the plot had lost its grip. She was not walking into a romance. She was walking into her own future. After the last exam paper was collected, the city exhaled. Students poured out of schools like water released from a dam, laughing, crying, shouting. Ning Ning slept for 12 hours straight, woke up confused, and then spent an afternoon lying on the living room floor staring at the ceiling as if it were a new planet. I brought out the nearly finished Xiao Siming costume, and she sat up so fast she almost hit her head. "You really finished it," she breathed, as if she had forgotten promises could survive stress. We attended the comic festival a week later. Ning Ning walked through the crowd in embroidered sleeves and a moonlit veil, her posture straight, her eyes bright. People asked for photos. She posed with a confidence that came from having earned her own breath. I watched her laugh with friends, watched her buy a ridiculous wand prop, watched her eat fried rice balls with glitter still on her fingertips, and I thought, this is what childhood should leave behind: joy, not scars. Results arrived in summer heat that made the asphalt shimmer. Ning Ning opened the score page with trembling fingers, and when the numbers appeared she made a sound between laughter and sobbing. She had done it. A top university accepted her. The Artemis Committee confirmed her scholarship. A medical track opened, the first step toward the life she wanted. Research, clinics, and the ability to pull pain into order. Jingyan hugged her as if he could weld the moment into her bones. I held her too, and she complained that I was squeezing too hard, then squeezed back harder. In the original plot, the floating crowd had summarized. Ningning's hands would have been damaged, her future narrowed to bitterness. Here her hands were steady, strong, still her own. Jingyan, who in that original story would have died seeking revenge, sat at our kitchen table and wept quietly with relief. He did not ask me to comfort him. He simply allowed himself to feel, which was its own kind of healing. Qi Shen's fate, however, followed the old rails without Ningning attached. He and Yuxi enrolled at the same mediocre college, a choice that looked romantic from far away and poisonous up close. They broke up and got back together in exhausting loops. Qi Shen blamed Yuxi for losing Ningning and punished her with cruelty disguised as passion. Yuxi blamed him for being weak and punished him with jealousy disguised as love. They posted dramatic apologies, then deleted them, then posted again. Their relationship became exactly what the captions had promised, a furnace fueled by ego and resentment. I did not watch closely, because I refused to let their fire warm my attention. But sometimes the floating crowd returned, whispering updates like gossip from a distant street. They're fighting again. He says he hates her but can't leave. She's threatening to expose him. Eventually, the crowd's tone changed from excited to tired. Tragedy is less entertaining when you realize it is real. Ningning went to university and chose medicine with the stubborn tenderness that had always lived beneath her discipline. She studied anatomy until her eyes ached, volunteered at clinics, and called me at midnight to complain about a professor who treated students like machines. Jingyan visited on weekends with bags of fruit and awkward advice, still learning how to be a present father rather than a distant provider. In his own quiet transformation, he started a children's medical support foundation, the kind that pays for surgeries for families who have nothing but hope. I used to think protection meant building walls, he told me once, standing on the balcony with a cup of tea. Now I think protection means building bridges. I teased him for sounding like a poster. He accepted the teasing, because he had learned that being mocked gently is sometimes a sign of belonging. Years passed. Captions grew rare. As if the invisible audience had grown bored of a life that did not bleed for entertainment. But once in a while, in the soft hour after midnight, a line would drift into view like a shy firefly. They no longer shouted about plot points. They confessed. Someone wrote they had been a child whose father beat them. And after reading Ningning's refusal to surrender, they finally sought help. Someone else wrote they had been a parent who used shame as discipline, and now they were learning to apologize. A person with a username like a broken joke admitted they had once thought coercion was romance, and now they felt sick remembering their own behavior. The crowd was smaller, quieter, and strangely kinder. One line appeared that made me laugh out loud in the dark. Auntie didn't do much, but somehow she did everything. I whispered back to the empty room. I did ordinary things. I listened. I respected. I stayed calm. I acted early. Ordinary is underrated. Ordinary is where safety lives. Ningning became an obstetrician, the kind who holds a laboring woman's hand and says, "I'm here," with calm that makes pain bearable. She wore blue scrubs instead of cosplay robes most days, yet I still saw the same girl steadfast, imaginative, unwilling to be owned. She carried life into the world with steady skill and fierce respect, and she did it without forgetting the teenager who once fought for a score that would decide her freedom. One winter evening she came home after a long shift, eyes tired but bright, and she told me about a woman who had been terrified, and how Ningning had coached her breath until the fear loosened. It felt like pulling someone back from a cliff, she said quietly. I understood, too well. Jingyan funded new maternity wards and donated incubators without needing his name engraved on the wall. He had learned that giving is not a performance. It is a responsibility. As for Qi, Shen, and Yuxi, the old plot concluded without needing Ningning's blood. They kept injuring each other until there was nothing left to injure. The captions returned one last time with a tired sigh. They destroyed each other like the original ending. No cheers, no fireworks, only exhaustion. Then a final sentence appeared, gentle as a hand on a shoulder. Thank goodness the heroine escaped. I looked at Ningning asleep on the couch, still wearing her hospital badge, her hands curled loosely as if even in rest they were ready to help. The story that tried to claim her had failed. The crowd in the air thinned, and the room returned to normal tea. Quiet, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft certainty of a home that had been rewritten. I poured warm milk into a glass out of habit, smiled at the ordinary ritual, and thought that life is not a script. It is a set of choices repeated daily until they become a path. When you choose yourself, tragedies lose their audience.